Hey everybody, BTO Pro here, and today we're going to take part of an existing website, build a brand new web component from it, talk a little bit about our process and how we go about doing things like this. So, if you've seen the new hacks.psu.edu, we're trying to forge a way towards alignment with the university's overall branding and design criteria. Now, it's not that we wanted to be out of compliance with this. Working on a project where you could have 25 different roles filled, you kind of have to pick and choose. So recently, what are you talking about, Brian? So recently we rolled out, and there's a couple videos about hacks.psu.edu. This is built using design inspiration from the university style guide. However, under the hood, so pull up here didn't even know where that went. It's powered by web components. So by using components, we can create bands and reusable pieces. And in video, I leverage other tags. We can see where are you by the numbers, squares. There we go. We count up. Count up as an element, produce it another time, right? So let's take something else and start to try and match that. Now, I wanted to go with the smallest piece. And in this case, a card on a website. Now, one that I noticed was these impact story cards. So just from a technical standpoint, something that Web Components helps to do organizationally is, right, I've got column 12, card, large, all this good stuff. This is assuming a Twitter Bootstrap-based design paradigm. And even if it's not, it's something very similar just because of the naming convention. Now, if that didn't make any sense to you, good. It's not supposed to make sense to everybody, but I can plainly see, there it was. I was trying to get this panel lined up. Plainly see Bootstrap right there, bootstrap.css. So that is Bootstrap based. Imagine that we wanted the card and we wanted it to look that way, but not with all of the specificity of Bootstrap. This is where Web Components comes in. Another area, and we've learned this from doing Drupal-based systems over a long period of time. The impact. Where was the overview one? Maybe it was stories of impact. This is the one. Okay. So what I noticed is, when we go to, in this case, stories of impact, we have a similar card, right? It's actually the one with beyond limitations. We'll notice that this is slightly different. Let's call up A and B. And I'm sure this is intentional, but this is an area where I personally got this wrong quite a bit in building systems where I have cards. This happened to me all the time, right? So we have the design in the one place, and it's this blue, it's centered, capitalized, right? It still has that aspect. It has that image. It's a tall card, and this is a slightly different card, and it's, with slightly different criteria potentially. There we go. That makes it a little bit more like what it's supposed to look like. And I'm sure if I right click on this, yeah, okay. So we do have some Bootstrap based stuff, but we can see that the Bootstrap code in question is different between A and B here. Right, large card, text white. Actually, that might have been the same. That would be great if it was. Large card, text white. Okay, so yes, that's good. It's got some minor design inconsistency between here, and I'm not criticizing. It is actually built in the same way it appears. Right, there's span class pillar with education, Bootstrap CSS kicking in, and then let's see. This one's just a span. Okay, so we get into that type of inconsistency. Super, super small inconsistency between those two. So where does Web Components come in? How can we solve this using component architecture? So I'm going to make a new element in our mono repos where we manage all of our elements. And before we got started on anything, we wrote tooling to write elements for us. Now, this just gets us the boilerplate. But because of the time at which we were building them, we weren't sure which way we were going to go. So you notice there's multiple options in here. Used to be a lot more, but I'll just go with lit element. I'm going to name this Polaris-theme, only because internally that's what tends to be the name of this design standard as I've seen in the past. So description is a Polaris issue based branding styled, something like that. I can update this later. No, I don't want to use Sass. I need to make the default for that now. No, I don't want a guided tour. Okay. So we're going to go write a bunch of files, put in the initial prerequisites so that we can manage types of elements, like it's very meta on this. In this case, in the end, it's going to be named Polaris hyphen theme because I'm going to have several. Now, ultimately, I want to make a hack CMS theme that meets certain design criteria here as far as what these little sites are. I don't want people to have to know any of what the beginning of this video was to be able to create this website. And there is hacked wiring already for bands and some of this styling aspect of things. We'll get there. So what this is doing, it's setting things in motion so that we can actually build a card. Now, as I'm reviewing a card in general, right, because that's the thing that's going to be built, I'm looking at certain media-based requirements, properties that I could think of, stuff that needs to be flexible, potentially HTML being added, versus things that are not hard-coded, but kind of more hard-coded as far as like just a term, as opposed to, well, that could be a term or an image. And in looking at this card, right, we have the pillar as it's mentioned. I'll just call it pillar, right? So pillar would be at the top. Then we're going to have the card as far as, so there's an image. Then there's going to be a label of some kind or title, right? That's probably not going to have any variability in the design as far as how that's placed on there. And then there's some rounded corners. So CSS we'd use for rounded corners in that regard. And it appeared that it changed based on the viewport. So let's pull this in and see. See, when we got real small, it did grow. So there's something now, something to that as far as display flex, some criteria when we get down to mobile. Okay, so down to mobile, it's flowing the whole way. Okay, so I'm not going to match all of the styling in this little video is what I'm guessing, but unfortunately I have to do yarn install again because of some issue in how we build stuff. But while that's doing it, I'm going to say code. Period. We're going to open up VS Code, and what I should have now is Polaris hyphen. Okay, so we got a thing called Polaris theme. Doesn't do anything. All right, because there's an element called Polaris hyphen theme. Now, eventually, we will have a hack CMS theme that works that way, but that's not what we're working on today. Today, working on just one block, and so that block I'm going to call like Polaris card style.js for needing to think about what it is. All right, so this is an impact story. So maybe it's not actually a card, it's like a story card. And these words are very hard to hash out. As we all know in programming, the hardest aspect is naming. So Polaris story card. Cool. Looking in what we have here, we have a source directory. So this has this Polaris theme. That'll be done, worked on at a later point in time. So what I'll work on is I copy and paste that over. And we'll see a lot of this is repurposable. A lot of it is even branded initially as being, or labeled rather, as being HTML element. In this case, this is stuff just built into the browser versus convention-based things, such as applying styles in this regard. So in our demo, I also have Polaris theme, but that's not what I'm going to call this. We're going to call this Polaris story card, right? And just for my own consistency, story card, theme. Let's see, anywhere the word theme shows up. All right, so I like to make a property or an attribute that stores the name of the tag, and then I reference that in a certain way. You'll see below. And so I say Polaris theme.tag in this case, but we don't have that anymore. So it's going to be Polaris story card. Now, there's a lot of boilerplate that gets stamped in. For example, updated lifecycle hooks, first updated. We're not going to need any of that stuff. This is a very basic design element. If anything, probably could be vanilla JavaScript. I don't even need lit for this, but lit just makes it way easier. So I'm going to do, I'm going to do static get this keyboard. It's got a sticky E key. All right. And so we're going to do static get properties return. And the thing we're going to return, there's going to be oh my goodness, what did it just say? Okay. No, we're not doing this. There's going to be an image, right? It's going to be a string. That's for the background. Title, label. I actually personally prefer label. Okay. And then what was that other thing called? Pillar, I believe. All right. So there's going to be pillar. That's going to be type string as well. I honestly don't know that there's anything other than that, when it comes to the actual properties, I don't think there's any slotted material or material that needs to be, passed through as HTML that you nest within other HTML. I don't think we're going to have that. So this dot image, and I do this with a lot of things when I'm getting them started. So I'm going to go and find the actual hard link to the image in question. And we're going to do copy file name and just verify. No, that's not what I want. That's why we verify. Copy link address. There we go. Okay. So there's Kenneth there. Okay. Link address. And then I'm going to throw that in as this.image. Okay. Label Kenneth. Are you serious? And then pillar is research. Now that's kind of funny. But the pillar is actually education and it's beyond limitations. So beyond limitations. Pillar is education. Now, you may have already noticed I'm missing a property here. And the thing I'm missing is you can click on this and go somewhere. Now, I can handle this in one of two ways. One, just inspect real quick off screen. So div, education, body. I'm trying to find what actually is making this a link. Okay, I'm seeing it now. So it's there. I didn't see it initially. All right, so there's a link that wraps this card. Now, it's just wrapping the card. So I don't know. There's two different ways I could implement. I could actually put the link in the card, and then it assumes it has to go somewhere. Most likely it's going to go somewhere. I don't know that you're going to use this just as the cards. However, it would be nice if we just use it as a design asset, and then we were able to wrap it in a link like we would traditionally expect and make it a link. That way it can be either one, right? It can be a listing of these things in a display, or you could click it, it modals up, but you have the same asset. The goal is that we're not having this variation, which is very similar. It could be on purpose it was done that way, that we wouldn't get this variability in the tiniest of assets. We could use CSS variables to do that, but all right, so I'm not actually going to put a link in. I talked myself out of that one. So then the structure of what this is going to be pretty simple, but it's fun to do this as well. Edit HTML. I'm going to copy. And now I have my HTML in question initially. Now these CSS classes aren't going to do me any good in their initial context. We can see that there's style, background, and they're applying the background in this regard. Not a terrible idea. Let's wire up this image on that background part, which probably then means we can go without a background. It's kind of cool too. So we probably would want some type of default background there. Now I don't know that I need text white or that it's a LG card. I can look and see what that's actually providing. But if I look at beyond limitations, we see Bootstrap has just some basic margin and padding on there, right? And so beyond limitations, we're going to convert to be property driven. So this.label. Right. To me, this isn't a paragraph. That's very basic semantics. It's not like the end of the world, but it is. Need a card body on there. I mean, you can. Now, a fun thing when you convert to web components in this case, everything you hear says card because it has to be namespaced as card. Because we're down a level in the spec, I don't need to scope things that way. I can get rid of both of those, right? The large card and a card. It's our card, right? And then I don't need card height and body. Just be body. And if I really want to do, I could say class. Let's say it's label. So that way when I refactor, instead of it being a paragraph tag that gets that CSS, I am putting it on .label much more broadly. And education, right? It's in the span. Again, I want pillar. And the reason I want to go and add pillar there, in my mind at least, I believe one of these had pillar on it. Yes, pillar, like that. So I'm going to try to match the styling. Okay, there I just did. And so I'm going to do .pillar, and we're going to paste that in. Okay. Roboto condensed. Let's make sure that we can match that styling. So the way I'm going to find where Roboto is coming from. Oh goodness. Open too many tabs on it. So we're going to open this up. I'm going to put in Roboto condensed. It's going to tell me where this font is coming from. However, I'm probably going to see it Robot or Google font. It's going to be somewhere. That's font awesome. Nope, it's coming in from some other file. That's fine. Let's fire that one up just because this will be for the demo. Notice I haven't actually shown anything yet. Yeah, let's keep those styles. We're going to do a link import. No, we're not going to do an import. What are you talking about? We reference those. We're getting way out of the game here. Link rel style sheet href. Yes, thank you. In a while. Link rel equals style sheet href equals. All right, so that should bring our font in. This is just for the demo here. In this case, it's not Polaris theme, it's Polaris story card. Okay, Polaris story card is going to not go in theme. We're not doing anything with theme. We're working on our demo. So we're going to have Polaris story card. This is not going to have any content inside of it. It's just naturally they're going to work this way. And then I could say image equals and title equals and tagline, but that's not what the tag is, right? This is the issue with using autocomplete technology. Right, so we're going to have an image that links to a .jpg of some kind. I know what that is, so we'll put that on there. That'd be a good test. Okay, so what I like to do, I like to then have Polaris story card. Call it Polaris story card. So I like to have an empty one, and then I like to have one where I'm populating these values, and let's see what happens. Now, in the original design comp, it also is wrapped in a link. So we should see what that looks like when we wrap it in a link. Okay, so we'll wrap it in a link, and this link is going to go to PSU.edu. Funsies, again, so we can see that. And we might have to add some styles, right? Just generically, that's a text decoration, none, something like that. And we're not pulling in Polaris theme. This is going to be /lib/ what's these? Polaris story-car.js. All right, so that way the definition is there. These other things are just some housing stuff so that it ends up rendering our demo in a certain way. So we've got the initial HTML structure. Oh, we need to have the pillar there. There's that pillar. Okay, so it's the pillar. Then on the actual, we have a wrapper here on this div. So on the actual div, and honestly, this might be display flex. Or inline flex, that can be changed, so it's not a big deal. Let's say not wrapper. We always love a good .wrapper class. And we'll say wrapper, and we'll take text white out of there because we are scoping now. And then I don't think we want, we don't want that to be able to be modifiable, to be perfectly honest. So I'll say var Polaris story card color, and we'll default to white. That's a good starting point. I also think on the card itself, we probably want some type of baseline background color. And the reason is just in case that that image doesn't load or something of that nature. Let's take this. That's a nice feature of VS Code, and I'm not matching the official university blue at this moment. I'm just putting some value in. Okay, so if we have the CSS variable, we're solid. This is going to be the color, and actually, yeah, it's fine. We'll do it that way. If I were to move it up to host, you could override it from outside. So I could override background color very easily by just targeting Polaris story card and changing the background color. If you don't want someone to be able to do that, Like if I don't want you to be able to override the text color in this way, just by defining it easily at the top of the document and letting it cascade through, I could do it like this, where it's inside the shadow root because these are compartmentalized and contained. I could still give you a CSS variable. That way you're intentionally overriding it. And in fact, as I say this out loud, yeah, that's actually the way I want that to work. So you can still change those values, but you have to have intentionally said, I'm using the CSS variable, and then it'll change the value. I'm blocking the cascade on purpose. So we've got dot pillar. Okay, we just lifted that. Label has some interesting considerations, right? It's not just beyond limitations. That has padding, but the outside wrapper of that, the body. All right, the card body has a certain background, a box model to it. We've got label, and you don't have to do it this way, but I like to do it that way. So the label is inside there. I'm not sure if Roboto will end up working as a result of that, but we'll see. And the large one, and it's got some floating left thing. I don't like that. Not a big fan of that one, that convention there, but whatever. As far as left, yeah, I don't like it. Not a big fan of just absolute positioning of the body to force to the left, but whatever. It's not the end of the world. It has a width to it. Okay. Span on this education part, that's for the pillar. And if we look, it's different. It's a different implementation than it was in the other one. Let's take that, and we are going to use that one instead. And you can see the difference between those two web properties. I ran into this all the time when I was developing Elms LN. We'd roll out some new function. It would have a listing and a card, and then I would look at the design comps, which we had a style guide commission, goodness, forever ago. It's probably 2012 now. So like 10 years we had a style guide commission. I would then be interpreting and go, oh, that's a card. And then I match the card. And then it'd be in another system, and I'd use a different series of settings for almost the same thing. In this case, Roboto condensed versus Roboto. And that doesn't seem like a huge deal, but there was decision tree made. There was thinking, there's guesswork. This is going to eliminate all of that. So, all right, wrapper, host, body, label, pillar. We've got that information wired up. We're trying to make this card. It also has rounded corners to it. Border radius, there we go, on that card. I knew I was missing something. So there's border radius on the wrapper in our case, and there's also some margining going on. Okay. All right. So hopefully we will end up getting that net effect. So save those files. Let's go to the element in question. It's in Polaris theme. I'll have anything name that. We're going to say yarn start. And it's going to fire up this little test bed. And we've got our initial work on the Polaris card. We can see that we've got the image there. We've got this at the top. It looks largely correct. Let's change it to say system, because in here the pillar is named system. Our label's showing up way down there, so I got to fix something there. Which is, again, I mentioned I didn't like that when it got to that part. It has to do with absolute positioning. But the real issue is probably somewhere in this card having the actual having a minimum width of some kind. Now, I'm not going to get into the breakpoints for that. I'm going to go, I guess. But body's position absolute. I don't see that. We'll put them up there. I wonder if I have to do. There we go. Getting closer. So the wrapper needs position relative, and the wrapper's also going to need a some type of min width, most likely, at like 300 pixels or so. We're looking pretty close already. So relative positioning, minimum width, and it's probably just me not copying and pasting appropriately. Okay, and that wrapper with the position relative, what that's going to end up doing, I wonder if I can actually do it on the host. Let's see. That worked too, but again, scoping. This should be display block anyway, but occasionally I'll just remove any doubt. Okay, so we've got the original over there. All right, and these are how tall normally, or wide rather. I guess I just didn't copy the right value. Computed width. Really? There's no width value. Oh, it's 255. But that means it got it from somewhere. What is making you 255 here, man? Width is 285 outside of this. That is very interesting. And it has to do with those columns being applied. I see. So what's with this is it really 255? Is it like hard coded? I don't see that anywhere. Anyway, let's do min width is 255 pixels, but I'll just put that on the tag. That would be a good example of like, whoops. That would be a good example of, you know, when I probably want the user to be able to override that. Now you can see that goofed it up because that wrapper has to have its display block and relative, and then the whole thing is flexed so that they work together. So I am going to need, in this scenario, some type of, let's say min width, but we'll make that a CSS variable. Polaris-story-card min width. Save. All right, there we go. So now we've got this card. We can modify the values after the fact. This one is linked, and you see no discernible difference. It's kind of cool. There's no border on this version of it, and on this one, it doesn't have a border either, which is fine. Okay, they do now. This gets into like how you would use them somewhere else, right? Because then this card, the cutoff point for this card is right here. So we've built in the design consistency. So now we could technically put that card there, and we're no longer engineering all the bits of that card. And I understand this is a pretty simplistic one, but it also gets us out of the business of these specific class names. And the reason we would want to get out of these specific class names is if we re-architected our design system to no longer involve Twitter Bootstrap, we got to redo everything. If this is its own scoped card, and yes, you're still using, in this case, some column layout. I mean, you could use our grid plate tag to do this, but if you're using Bootstrap and the column layout that they provide, you can still mix those conventions together, but you've abstracted the design consistency as far as those individual atoms from, in this case, the whole display side by side. So I'm going to just, for organization's sake, I'm going to put some, is that really padding? All right, it's got 15 pixel padding on each side and put it in a row, right? And I'm not going to make that little story intro thing. That's something slightly different on the other side of that. But let's try and replicate all three of these. So I'm going to take those and move them off camera. I'm literally going to just see the thing I'm copying and pasting. So I'll move that over there off camera. And what we're going to do is try to implement them. So now polaris-story-card, I could do padding is by default 0, 15 pixels so that we get the side-by-side presentation of that. Let's close these. I got too many of these stinking tabs open. Okay. All right, so then we get the 15s next to each other. Let's now take this and do class equals container. And this is just for my own being able to visualize correctly where it is. I don't like that they I don't like that this doesn't have any border to it. It just looks weird to me. So the container, I'm going to do dot container. We'll do that color blue, just so I can there we go. So I can see what the actual outline is, because this image was all white and that didn't help me. So if I switch to the images in question, so we've got this impact story, copy link address, right? So then I would implement image right? And this would be more the way that this would have been implemented then, right? And it's the pillar in this case is education, or a nice thing, right? I'm putting it in this way, but it's going to all cap it, which is cool. And then there's a label, and the label is going to be from the waiting room to the living room. Okay. Right, and then we're gonna take that out, copy, and get rid of that card, paste. We'll get rid of that card and we'll paste, save. All right, so I've got those three now. Cool. Now I don't have to do my little container thing with my background, or I guess I could just put a margin on it, so it's just very clear where it lives. Let's say 64 for funsies, right? So it gets a nice spacing. You don't want to see the whole stinking thing. So I've got that spaced out now. All right, tab those in, tab those in, tab those in. Now is when I might go into my card and say, all right, we're not going to have those defaults, right? It's just not going to be there, right? Because I don't want it to render. I don't want someone to render it that way. And these are going to inform the second one with Kenneth, and this is also education. This third one, fortunately, is different. I can see it's community, and it is building community through compassion. Okay, and that's going to snag that link address. Okay. And then we've got Kenneth, and make sure we do his label here, and here's what beyond limitations. All right, save all. Let's go into here, and we'll do no label, we'll do no color here. Okay. So let's see what it looks like. Side. Not half bad. All right, so I didn't deal with any of the, like media queries, things like that, but this is the basic idea with this approach. And then let's say our design system changes or our criteria change, and now maybe when we highlight that and go, ooh, well, that's the link has like margin and padding around it that kind of looks wonky versus I don't actually even see that. Wrong. No, I'm not even getting that outline on there. So I could start to bake that into this. Now I do that either in the demo here where I put it on the link, or I could support a link internal to the card. Now at that point, I'm kind of making a decision where I say it has to be a link. So just having that ability to at least encapsulate the other aspect of this card. All right, close our link tag. Has helped us achieve a level of design consistency that we otherwise would probably make initially, but it's about sustainability and sustaining these changes over time, which gets very difficult. I've even done it on a very small project as far as number of deploys like Elms was. So, all right, so let's save. Now those are all in line that way, and then I could tap through them. We see, we still got that weird, right? So I can dive into the box model a little bit and try to clean that up. All right, so we've got the story card, and it has its own built-in spacing there. The links, maybe they need to be display block or inline. Maybe they need to be flex. Inline flex. That way it encompasses the whole card. Good. Right. So I really try to hammer into the box. And there's the actual issue. The wrapper has this top margin internal to the element. It doesn't need that. So I'm going to take that out of wrapper. And I really like to hammer into these box models being so perfect. And so this is going to be display inline flex. Okay. And then on the Polaris card, I am going to put a margin. And it's going to be a margin on the top that is, right, in this case, 2.5 relative. And then on the card, we're going to drop margin. What? Margin top. Sorry, it's like, what is that? I know what margin top is. Thank you so much for linking me to that. Okay, there we go. So now let's see. We go in tab. Still on there, but it's because the link is above that, right? So now that we've moved that code, it's not interior to our element. We can take margin top, and to be perfectly honest, I can put them on the link, wrapping the cards. Wanted to. Now we get much closer to the outline. Right now, I probably still will go and just do that, and maybe the margin top is on the links, so that part at least, yeah, there we go, is more consistent, right? So you can start to get into those sorts of details. If we have the focus state on this, right, we can start to get into the real tiny details. I focus this, perhaps I've got the border that perfectly wraps the edges of that card, and getting into those little teeny details is something that Web Components really helps with at scale. I'm not then thinking, how do we make it look that way, right? If we fix it in one, and because of the scoping, we know that we've got that applied everywhere else. So I am going to now go and push this up into our own project. This will hopefully show up at a later point in time. It's kind of just starting point, to be perfectly honest, as well as a video for those of you students who will have a project that involves reverse engineering parts of certain websites so that we can empower people to build them elsewhere. Here's your video for that. So if you want to learn more about the project or projects, hacks.psu.edu is the place to go. And keep tuning into YouTube. We'll keep making more videos.